everybody. Thank you for joining in. It's Casey with Pinecase this Thursday afternoon. I actually had to recheck my schedule and stuff because I'm so used to saying see you next Tuesday, but we're really blessed to be spoiled to have a whole bunch of people jammed into the month of July. We were talking about maybe slowing things down for August, but it looks like we've been blessed with a whole bunch of really cool guests. And tonight is definitely one of those evenings. Thank you so much for joining me, Quinn. Honestly, I appreciate you so much. I was checking you out and started going down the rabbit hole of all the beautiful content you're up to and then things that you're out there doing in the community. And I couldn't help but think there's so many textbook type workers out there that when someone's out there supporting people from a true place in their soul, that you definitely shine, I think, amongst what kind of the standard is to be, supportive. So thank you from the recovery.
Thank you. That's very kind of you to say. And thank you for providing this space for me to come on today and talk a little bit about my experience, strength, and hope.
Yeah, no, it's my absolute honor. Would you mind telling everybody a little bit of a backstory? Because it is one heck of a backstory, that's for sure. When you sent me your bio today, I was reading it and to come through adversity like that and still shine as hard as you do, it's pretty impressive. But I have the backstory. Everybody else, if you don't mind.
Thank you. So I was born in France and grew up in Utah, Salt Lake City, Utah. My parents had gotten divorced and my mom came to the States. She was already a very traumatized individual because of her childhood abuse and things. So she didn't really ever get taught how to raise kids. So she was just a child trying to raise kids and stuff. And that already is hard. When we moved to the United States, she didn't speak a word of English. Neither did my brother or I. And we got heavily bullied. It was like the 90s. Just people weren't very fond of foreigners or anybody who was just not like them. Much more acceptable nowadays. But
fair.
So we were heavily bullied and ostracized because we didn't speak English, and it's just how it was at the time. Mm-hmm. And because of that, we were very vulnerable people, not being able to communicate properly and things like that. So my mom ended up marrying a missionary. We were living in Orem, and there was a bunch of neighborhood kids. And there was a kid that was just a few years older than most of us, and he was making us do a lot of sexual favors and things to each other in front of him and his girlfriend type thing. And then also making us do things to them. So after a couple of years of that going on, I finally, at 7 years old, I was like, you know what, I've had enough of this. I don't know. Something just started to feel wrong. I didn't know what I was doing. And it started to click. I'm not comfortable. And something as small as me going over to their house and him being like, hey, let me see your belly button. Just something at that moment, I was like, I'm tired of this person taking advantage of my body, just using it as they want. And so I ran to the front of the house and I knocked on the door, and his mom answered. I'm like, your son, he keeps doing stuff and wants me to show him my belly button. And she was like, okay. And then I ran home and I told my mom and I told my brother, and they were like, dude, whatever. But as a 7-year-old, unable to communicate properly or, even communicate how I was feeling or the entire experience, it just didn't get, I didn't express myself properly. And so it got overlooked. And for the longest time, it actually really wasn't the fact that it happened to me. It was the fact that they were making us do it to each other, and so somebody else out there, has memories of me, doing stuff to them, in front of these people. And that is what really traumatized me. I was really hurt by that, thinking that, I was somebody's, core memory like that. So that kind of stayed, that just on top of being bullied and moving around, not making friends and everything else like that. I was a very introverted person. And when I hit 7th grade or 8th grade, I moved to France because my mom was like, "You're getting out of control. You need to go back and live in France with your dad," who I barely knew.
Right.
So I get to France. His then wife just had 3 kids that were within a year apart of each other. I think it was like 3, 4, and 7 or something. So this woman, is welcoming into her home some teenage kid from a previous marriage when she's already got 3 kids. So you can imagine she wasn't too fond of me. I wasn't too fond of her. Life was complete hell. And my mama said, "After a year, you can come back." So after a year, I told her, "Hey, I'm ready to come back." She's like, "Well, you have to ask Quinn." Ironically enough, the the person that she was with at the time was also named Quinn. So you
Oh,
have to ask Quinn if you can stay. And to me, that was just such a like, you're not first,
yeah.
you're not my first priority anymore. Like if he says no, then it's no, and I just felt so disconnected from, my dad wasn't in France for 11 months of the year that I was there. So it was just me and her, my stepmom for that 11 months just going through hell. And so I felt disconnected from my dad. I felt disconnected from my mom. I had just moved back to the United States to a different place now with no friends, and I was just so alone. And I saw some kids like skating by. Well, luckily Quinn said yes. He said I could stay. So that was really cool. But I saw some kids just skating by, and I was like, this is the first time that I'd seen anybody actually do a trick on a skateboard. And I was like, "Oh, dude, that's cool." And this kid just started skating around in front of me. And so we made friends, and a couple months later, school started. I knew these kids, these skater kids from school. We were kind of, I finally started to make some friends where I felt like I could goof off and,
Be
be
comfortable.
whatever. Right.
Yeah.
And so we're having a good time. We have this little clique of ours, we're just typical freaking skater kids,
And mobbing around.
Yeah, mobbing
Yeah.
around, being hooligans, waxing
Yeah.
up curbs and just, stupid
Totally,
stuff.
yeah.
So,
Tearing up your shoes.
yeah. So there's like an opposition skater crew in our school that just immediately disliked us. It was like a competition to see who could do the biggest stair sets and all this other stuff. And then as we grew older, going to high school and stuff, it became more of a competition of who can do the most crazy stuff, who can throw the biggest parties, who can, pull the hottest chicks and freaking, get the most drugs and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
And just that like environment of feeling like home, like dude, girls like me, guys want to be me. I'm popular. Finally, I have all these drugs and people are always calling me. They need me. They want me. That ego just fueled my addiction for like
Right.
validation. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And it was like for me personally, looking back at my addiction, I realized that yeah, sure, the drugs feel good. I mean, that's why we do them. But
Mm.
it was everything that surrounded it. It was my obsession. It wasn't the substance itself. It was the obsession for me to want to feel validated or for me to like want to numb, my past memories of like the child abuse or, for me to mask, I'd do a bunch of freaking coke and be all talkative and stuff for a little bit, and I thought,
Yeah.
oh, I don't need to work on my character or my charisma. I can just use substances to be this person I wish I could be,
Yeah,
you know?
totally. Yeah, it's like a
So
bit of a mask, right? I think people forget about that. Like there's the addictive quality, right? Like the hormone part of it and all of that, but it's also like the ritual of actually doing the drugs. It's like the sourcing them, it's the finding them, it's the connections that we have in those communities. And then like relying on that for any sort of like, self not gratification, but like self anything, self promotion, self like any sort of friendship, like everything kind of connects to that one thing. And I know that when there's like that running joke, like when you get clean, like you'll see who your friends are, but it's not necessarily seeing who your friends are, but like trying to figure out like what you really actually need in a friend. Like
right.
people kind of misinterpret that piece of it a little bit.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, now, things are completely different. I
Mhm.
hear people say all the time, "Oh, I've got, my friends are constantly dying and doing all this stuff." And it's like, yeah, me too. When I was in it, when I was running the streets for 18 years, absolutely. My friends were dying, every week. But the moment that I got out and I got sober and like even now I work with sober living,
Mm.
the men's
Yeah,
tribal
yeah.
house sober living, and I freaking, make content all the time. And yeah, people tell me, that, there are people, OD'd or whatever like that, but like friends, like my good friends, I haven't had one of
Yeah.
my good friends OD since I got sober because I just don't hang around with those people, who are
Yeah.
high risk of having an overdose.
Well, and that's the thing, like, it's unfortunate, but it is a numbers game, right? And like, and I don't want to talk ill, obviously. I know people are going through it day in, day out. And I know, like, the community that I come from, we had like something like 35 overdose deaths in 1 month, which was just like astronomical.
Wow.
And then it seems to be kind of coupled with suicide deaths as well, right? Because it's not just necessarily like the overdose part, but it's the lifestyle. And I don't, and again, like, I don't want to talk harsh of it, but it is a numbers game. If you are, obviously, if that's like who your community is at that time, like, the numbers are definitely going to go up. I don't, it's been a while since like since I've actually buried someone kind of within like and I say that because like I buried three of my brothers and I buried like half of
Mhm.
my friend group back then. But yeah, it's strange kind of once you're on the other side of it and you're like, wait, it's actually been a little while. Hey.
Yeah, yeah, it's just it becomes so prevalent that it just seems normal. It becomes normal, like, "Oh, did you hear freaking, Ray OD'd?" It's like, "Oh, dang."
Yeah.
That's sad, like, it just becomes a regular thing to where it doesn't even phase us anymore, and that's sad.
Oh, it's bizarre when it becomes common conversation, right? Like I remember when I first started kind of talking about it, like when I first started losing friends, and I was like, oh, okay, like it was like catastrophic. The whole world was falling apart, like the whole town grieved. And then as it kind of went on and on, it was like, you know, oh, I had grilled cheese sandwich and oh, and so and so passed away. Oh, and it's like I don't want to be dismissive to like, each and individual person. They matter, obviously. They're more
Mhm.
than just a hashtag and they're more than just like they're, the stories that we're able to tell on these platforms. But yeah, we're kind of in a desensitized climate right now with just the amount that we're losing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is the biggest reason why me personally, I advocate for recovery. I don't
Yeah.
advocate for a single, certain specific thing. I just wanna see everybody succeed.
Yeah.
And as somebody who has a strong foundation in Alcoholics Anonymous, because that's where I started, and
Right.
I mean, I was that big book thumper. I mean, I went to a meeting probably 3 or 4 times a week minimum for
Wow.
9 months. It was like my second home, and so, I mean, I've heard it all, I've seen it all. I've read the book so many times, it's unreal. I've done so much research on Bill Wilson,
Mhm.
uh, where he even came up with the program, and if anybody is interested, I really strongly recommend looking into, Bill Wilson's story before he created Alcoholics Anonymous. He actually did a psychedelic treatment in New York called the Towns Lambert treatment, where
Really?
he attributed his spiritual awakening that's promised to us in step 12 to this treatment. It's called the Towns Lambert treatment. Um, and it was a 3-day treatment. And he wrote to the great philosopher Carl Jung, like, look, I've had a spiritual awakening. The obsession for me to, use alcohol is gone. And then literally freaking 6 months later, he starts to do the trials for Alcoholics Anonymous.
Mm.
So, I mean, the evidence is there.
Yeah.
And the fact is that Alcoholics Anonymous as a program, I think is a great program. I think what the steps embody, surrendering and finding a higher power, making amends, all these other things, meditation, prayer. I think what those steps embody are fantastic, and the program itself works. What's happened is over the last 70 or 80 years, the people in the rooms have created what they think is the general consensus of what is acceptable. And what is not acceptable is things like medical assisted treatment, such as Suboxone or methadone. There's people who have, I would say, I would say that a large portion of people who suffer from substance abuse disorder also suffer from other mental health conditions, such as
Mhm.
ADHD, such as bipolar disorder, such as borderline personality disorder, schizophrenia, all these things that make a lot of sense if you think about why do these people abuse substances? Because they have mental health conditions. There's a literally a disorder, right?
Yeah.
When something's not in order, right?
Yeah.
When it's not working properly, it's in disorder. So
Yeah.
these people, such as myself, have a disorder of the mind that doesn't allow us to function the way that we think that we should by seeing how everybody else functions. So we feel
Yeah.
ostracized and we start to use these substances because those substances likely create the effect that makes us feel normal, whether it's a stimulation or a depression or whatever it is. Same reason why they prescribed me Wellbutrin, because they
Right.
said that I had borderline personality disorder.
Mm. Yeah.
It's because I have a disorder, and so they prescribe something for that. Well, when you grow up in a time and a place and financial whatever, you don't go to the doctors much, or you don't get evaluated often, or you don't do all these things. You find that relief on the streets instead of in a freaking doctor's office, and then you start to self-medicate to just feel like you're like you would, or like you feel like you're supposed to, if a
Yeah.
doctor prescribed you something.
Totally. I
And
was
that's
just gonna
why we feel so normal in that state of abusing. But then because we're not knowledgeable about substances and moderation and all these things, and we want to continue to abuse that stimulation, that's when it becomes the disease of being like, oh well, now I absolutely need this. I can't survive without this. I have no regulation control. My impulse control is flooded with dopamine. My frontal cortex isn't working properly, and now I've created a whole new disorder, which is what they've deemed addiction. And
right.
that's how they say it. Addiction is a disease, you
Yeah.
know?
I'm glad you explained it that way because a lot of people don't understand it from like a medical standpoint, and a lot of it is like self-medicating or like trying to be comfortable, right? And it's like I know that we fight kind of like the stigma of it all the time. People are like, "Oh, it's a choice, and it's this and it's that," and maybe for some people it is a choice to be a daily user just because it's a preference. But for the majority of people that are fighting it in a situation where it's becoming like a negative impact on their life, like it definitely is stemming from other places. And so yeah, it's been a while though, because that hasn't always been the conversation, right? I mean, historically, it was so dismissive, and people were so dismissive of it. But it looks like we're kind of on a horizon. We're not only dealing it with like a mental health standpoint, but then we're also kind of looking at as like a wellness standpoint when you're talking about like
Right.
meditating and all those beautiful things. Like, I think you have it right. Like when you have it from like a clinical standpoint and from a wellness standpoint, I think that's probably I don't know statistically what the numbers would look like, but for sure when you start looking at it as a lifestyle and not just like a symptom and treatment thing, that the numbers have to go up when it comes to like people actually being successful in programs like
Yeah.
that.
Absolutely. And, I think that honestly, the program of Alcoholics Anonymous would probably help a lot more people if it wasn't for, the judgment in the rooms of these
Yeah.
people who just think that, and I've been to places where I openly talk about how I recover,
Yeah.
and they've been welcoming. So it's not everywhere, and it's becoming to be more acceptable. And I think because of the fentanyl epidemic, people are starting to realize like, hey, I don't even care, like if you're only like, I don't even care if you are getting sober and you're freaking like having to do backflips every day to freaking stay sober. Like I don't care
Yeah,
if you're
totally. Yeah.
like, I just want you to be alive. And that's
Yeah.
the point that I got to, was like, you know being being so rooted in Alcoholics Anonymous. I was ingrained in that thinking that abstinence is the only way.
Right.
But once I hit that 12th step, and I was continuing to carry the message, and I started sponsoring people, and I still at that time did not have my spiritual awakening, still freaking white knuckling it, as they say, where I'm just still thinking about using, even though I'm, doing everything I'm supposed to do, taking inventory, sponsoring people, service work, freaking, praying, meditating, all these other things. I still had that obsession to want to escape because I had not yet built a life that I didn't want to escape from. I didn't heal. I didn't talk about my trauma, about the sexual abuse, about the abandonment, about the bullying, about all these things. Like, yeah, I talked to my sponsor about it, but I mean, you know, it was, it's like um, desensitization. The more that you talk about it, the easier it gets to talk about it.
Yeah,
And so
like
just going through
exposure
that with my
therapy.
sponsor that one time wasn't really enough to like make me feel, you know, comfortable enough to share my experience in that sense.
Right.
Um, and
I
so once
wonder
I got to
if
that point,
yeah,
sorry.
sorry to cut you off. I just wonder if people knew like the backstory more, if they would be more, if it would open up the door to people who are kind of coming at the recovery from a spiritual place. Because I mean, I've been to these meetings and I've been through these centers, and I've never gone through the program far enough. Speaking on like AA specifically, to get to that conversation where like the history comes from. Like it's really not even something I think that was ever like talked about, and all the conversations that we had were like they were all very like abstinence based, and then like the kind of harshness and cold that kind of comes from some of, I can't obviously, like I wouldn't even begin to speak for all meetings, but like that can come from some meetings, or like the people that are coming from them, because you're right, they do kind of put their own opinion in there. And it's hard not to think that maybe we've strayed a bit further from the book than I originally thought. Because to be honest, those aren't even things that I would have associated with that big book.
Yeah. Well, so I was pretty fortunate that the AA meeting that I went to down in Savannah, Georgia, was
Mm.
a very there was a variety of people, but there was a sober living that I was working with that um, brought all of their clients there to the same place every single day. So they all knew us, they knew who we were, they knew, we always brought a whole group of people. And at that AA meeting, there was a lot of, newcomers coming in and out. It was just, they saw it all. And I was pretty welcomed there.
Yeah.
At that time I was being abstinent, so I was doing all the steps. I was, doing everything I was supposed to. And I met this girl who at that time basically was sponsoring me, but not sponsoring me. Like, she was a good friend of mine in that, and I had my own sponsor who was a male, still is.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, but um, but she was also like teaching me stuff. I'd call her, and I mean, I liked her, so I was paying attention, and I actually
Right.
really excelled in the AA program, and I wanted to do well in this program, honestly, kind of to impress her. I still
Right.
had, I was sober, I wasn't healed,
Yeah.
so of course I was trying to get with her without, being too obvious about it. And she had
Mm.
9 months of sobriety as soon as I started, so she had, almost a year of sobriety over me.
Yeah.
And so I took a lot of what she said to heart, and she really helped me, along the way with my sobriety and whatnot. But when I first met her, she was like, "Hey, it's abstinence or nothing." You know,
Wow.
after
Yeah.
about after about a year and a half of her doing straight abstinence, she had to go and get some dental work done. They had to put her under, they gave her morphine. She came back to the rooms of AA crying, "Oh, I lost my sobriety, I lost my sobriety,"
Oh,
and it's like the trauma that brings of thinking like, I can't even go and get a tooth pulled without thinking I'm gonna risk my sobriety. Like, that's torture, so she got over that, whatever. And about 3 years into her sobriety, she started having more severe mental health conditions. She goes and sees her doctor, talks to her sponsor, ends up starting to do an Adderall treatment.
mhm.
So, like, Adderall, which is an amphetamine, typically would not be an acceptable thing,
Yeah.
but it just goes to show that, like, the longer that you have in sobriety, either you're going to stick into that same way of thinking, or you're going to realize, hey, look, if I got to take something to freaking be able to live a successful life, and I'm not over here obsessing and, selling my furniture to, stick a needle in my arm, then I think I'm doing all right. And that's kind of how I looked at recovery. Was I know that I have mental health conditions. So I have a few options. My first option is to get treated for my mental health condition through pills. My second option is to not get treated at all and just, continue to raw dog freaking mental health,
Yeah.
and then my third option would be to find a safe alternative.
Yeah.
And so when, I started to hear Joe Rogan talking about microdosing psilocybin and cannabis treatment helping, people in recovery, I had already been, I've been kind of using plant medicines my whole life, and think of it more as like a healing thing, like a tea, than anything else, and so I was like, oh well, you know why don't I just try using cannabis instead of these pills that they want me to take. I went to the doctor. They said, yeah, you got freaking, borderline personality disorder and ADHD and freaking whatever else. And so here's, prescription of lithium, here's Wellbutrin, here's Xanax, here's Adderall, here's freaking, Abilify. And I'm like, whoa, dude, like you're going to throw all these pills at me that
Easy.
are like, when I'm trying to get sober, like I'm trying to be sober, and you're going to give me Xanax and freaking Adderall on top of everything.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, like, is there something else? And I was living in Massachusetts, so out there, medical cannabis, recreational cannabis is legal. So it's like, well, I can prescribe you some cannabis, and that'll help you with the anxiety and the depression. And that was one of the biggest things, was just the anxiety and depression. But that anxiety and depression came from unhealed trauma. So I heard about the psilocybin, journeys and freaking ibogaine and ayahuasca and all these things, and I was like, that really interests me, because I see all these freaking comments and stuff. Oh, I'm scared to do it. I'm scared to do it. I was like, I'm not scared. I've done it hundreds of times. Like I didn't know that you could use it to heal.
Right.
And so I started to do some research on like, how do you heal? Because in my teens, I was doing ecstasy. I was taking psilocybin and freaking LSD and all these things.
Yeah.
But I was like going to concerts and freaking watching sunsets and all, like going to light shows and festivals and things like that, which is really cool. It's neat. It's a great experience.
And
If you,
therapeutic.
if you know how to not obsess over it.
Yeah.
But if you're looking to actually heal, then those disassociatives can put you in that space to heal. But you have to have a ritual. You have to have a ceremony. You have to like really, you have to set your intention. Like I'm going into this space to discover more about myself, and so I journal. I write down, okay, look, this is what I'm going through, like this is how I feel right now. This is what I'm worried about. This is what I want to work on. What do I need to do? And I'll sit down, and I'll start the ceremony. I might, and I'll do a prayer, and I believe in Jesus Christ. So I'll just, ask Jesus Christ and that energy to protect me, in this vulnerable space, and kind of create my own bubble of, protection and whatnot, and say my little prayers and stuff. And then, maybe do a fire ceremony where I'll write down some things that that no longer serve me. And then I'll burn the papers and watch it freaking, burn and whatever. And then I'll get into, and then it'll start to really kick in. And then I can start to ask myself, like, okay, like this is what I'm worried about. Like what's going on? And because it's a disassociative, you're literally pulling yourself apart from yourself for a moment so that you can be that bystander that's like, that's just 100% honest and truthful. And so so you can ask yourself, hey, why am I like this? And yourself will respond and be like, well, think about it. Why do you like to escape? Why do you like to feel numb? Why do you think that relapse is an option? Like these modalities that you're using, where you're just nodding off on a couch for hours at a time, or freaking up for days at a time, where you just don't remember anything. like, why do you like being in that state?
Right.
And making those revelations within myself, that is what heals. It's not the mushrooms, it's not the freaking LSD or the ketamine or whatever disassociative. It's the space that it allows you to be in for you to heal yourself.
Right, like giving yourself permission to like open those doors to then kind of navigate through that brain space. It's interesting what happens when you do things with intent,
Yeah.
because you can do the same things, but if your intent is not there, like it'll take you down a completely different, road. And it's
Mm.
it's it's a beautiful thing to think that you found a way to utilize some of the because Eastern medicine has been prevalent all around the world, for these purposes. I mean, it's and not even Eastern medicine, it's worldwide medicine. And like
Yeah.
it's crazy that it was kind of dismissed in North American culture for so long as just being like, kind of whatever
Well, I
hacker,
mean,
like
I don't know. I mean, I don't want to be the conspiracy theorist, but basically when freaking, you know, before the drugs were actually legal
yeah,
when Alcoholics Anonymous was formed in 1934. Like, you could just go to the pharmacy and get a vial of morphine off the shelf.
absolutely. Everything.
So until freaking big pharma, decided that they could put everything into pill form, because then you could patent it,
Yeah.
you know, and then they started to, and this is all documented,
Yeah.
once they started to manufacture pills and able to patent them, what they would do is they would go and pay these universities, or they would grant these universities, hundreds of thousands of dollars, like, hey, we'll fund your university or your college or whatever it is that you want to do, but you have to teach our curriculum. And our
Yeah.
curriculum is not Eastern medicine, it's Western medicine, you know. And you could argue that yes, there are some amazing advancements in pharmaceuticals, and I don't deny that whatsoever. I
Yeah.
think that the oversaturation of pharmaceuticals is what's wrong, and I think that we could heal probably, a huge majority
Mhm.
of what ails most of us with plants,
Yeah,
and
I agree with you.
that's what I prefer to do.
I agree with you 100%. And a lot like, people talk about these drugs and these chemicals as like like as they're so negative, but the reality is, I mean, like heroin is a poppy, you know what I mean? Like cocaine comes like I mean, you can still buy coca leaf tea in
Well,
Canada. Oh,
they're highly processed though, like
mhm.
cocaine is made with gasoline, so,
Yeah, well, yeah.
like, the
Yeah.
coca leaves themselves they are actually good for you, and a lot of the locals will just, kinda suck on the coca leaves because it's like, I think it does something to your blood that makes it maybe a little bit thinner or something, so that you can, I don't know. The locals, they do it, and not because they're addicted or anything, just because
Mhm.
they say that it's good for you. Kinda like old French people will tell you having a glass of wine every night is good for
Right.
you, so,
Yeah, absolutely.
um, but yeah, when they mix it with, all the chemicals and do the whole processing of those drugs,
Mhm.
poppy is a good healing plant, at the right doses or in the right instance. And
Right.
that was something that I really had to learn too, because just like my friend who went to the dentist and had to get her tooth pulled, I did too. And so
Yeah.
I had to come to that crossroads, like, am I gonna lose my sobriety date because I might be prescribed painkillers for getting 9 teeth pulled, you
Yes.
know?
I know.
So I got 9 teeth pulled,
Appropriate, like, I don't know.
and because my veins were still so shot from my substance abuse, they
Yeah,
couldn't put me under. So all I had to do it with laughing gas and, Novocaine,
yeah,
and I did it awake. So they're, pulling out freaking molars and broken stumps of teeth, because I was also, for the last 4 years of my addiction, I was addicted to crack as well.
okay, yeah,
Um, so my teeth were terrible.
mhm,
So, they're pulling out these teeth, and, like, I don't feel it, but I feel the pressure and I hear the freaking, like, shattering of the teeth and stuff. So it was pretty intense, and luckily, it wasn't so bad that I needed painkillers. They gave me the option, and I took the option, but I didn't take them because I was waiting for the pain to be bad enough. I was waiting for the numbness to go down, and after the Novocaine and everything wore off, I was like, like, it's bad, like, it hurts, but it's not so bad that I feel like I would need to, take a a
Yeah.
painkiller. Now, if it gets worse, then yeah, I'll take it. And the reason is that is the right setting,
Yes.
and that was something that I had to learn was that there's a time and a place for drugs. You
Mhm.
know, is it the right time and place to freaking, do some heroin in a friend's bathroom at a party or some coke, at a freaking concert? Is that the time and place? No.
No.
Is if you get in an accident and you break your leg or you break your femur or something and they freaking have to give you morphine so they can operate on you, is that an acceptable is time and place? I think it is. And I don't think that that should cost us our sobriety.
No, I
And
agree.
and that was something, that I mean, one of the things that I realized about Alcoholics Anonymous is that it just abstinence is not possible. It
Yes,
is
that's
literally impossible to be abstinent from all mood or mind altering substances because birth control is a mood or mind altering substance.
right.
You know what
Coffee,
I mean? Right.
like coffee is associated with AA. Like it's like AA,
Yeah.
go there.
Yeah.
Like
Exactly.
it's like,
The
and to
coffee
keep
in AA has helped more people than the freaking
right, it's crazy.
um
To me, like I can't drink coffee. Coffee has me like I'm a tea drinker, and even then it's like pretty high in caffeine, and it's not, and that's not because I haven't drank coffee my whole life. I mean, rolling smokes and drinking coffee was like a pastime with Nan or whatever, but now as an adult it's just not something that I like particularly partake in. And so to say that, like, where do you draw the line in abstinence then? Because there's
exactly.
things that are used in day to day that absolutely would rock my toot. So um
Exactly, and I'm a firm believer in, like, if you let one person do it, you
mm,
can't discriminate and not let anybody,
right.
and that's why, I feel like and this might be, like, a touchy subject, but, the abortion law. I feel like if you're gonna let one person, you gotta let everybody. You can't be like, "Hey, only people who have done this or, this situation happened." It's not like that. It's across the board. And if you're gonna let one person do it, you gotta let everybody else do it. And so if you're gonna sit there and say, "Oh, well, caffeine and nicotine, that's not, that doesn't count." It's like, well, then you can't well, then neither does anything else because you're literally just like pandering to what is comfortable for you. Like maybe you didn't sell, your stuff for, or beg for money for a pack of cigarettes, but I did.
But yeah,
You know what I mean? Like,
yes, I
so
know
I've
people.
definitely that was definitely a contributor to my obsession.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, thank you for saying that, because I don't think that that's enough people really actually talk about like nicotine addiction. Like you can't tell me that people haven't done some weird stuff for a pack of
oh yeah.
smokes.
Oh
I
yeah.
mean,
No, I freaking I mean, me personally,
mm,
I've taken cigarettes out of ashtrays or freaking, just like picked them up off the
that's
floor or,
yeah,
I remember seeing this one girl who had like taken this big ashtray and was sitting down on the ground on the concrete, just like getting all the freaking tobacco out of them and making, like more cigarettes. And I was just like, oh man, like that's, you know,
mhm.
when you're freaking taking just the smallest ends of it to make enough to make one cigarette, you gotta get like 50 or 60 of them, and half of it's, burnt anyway. Like, that is just that,
That's
you
the
have it bad.
same level of intensity as what people are willing to do for the substances that they're talking about that you need to be absent from. So I mean, I think that that's case in point right there. It goes to show that like you can't really say one thing is worse than the other, because if it is fake, pardon language, if it is affecting you in a negative way, which clearly like that's not the most glamorous situation, right? Like that needs to be talked about, like
Yeah.
then yeah, it's negatively impacting you. The
Yeah,
other
and
thing,
that's basically, like, the freaking that's, like, the conclusion that I've come to.
yeah.
Because people tell me, "Oh, you're not sober because you use cannabis or you take, psilocybin or whatever." And what it comes down to is like for me, and everybody is going to have their different, where they draw the line. It might be caffeine, it might be nicotine, it might be, freaking plant medicines. It might be, hey, I've got ADHD, I need Adderall. It might be, hey, I've got bipolar disorder, I need Wellbutrin. It might be whatever it is. Everybody's recovery looks different. Um, but for me, I just had to say, look, anything that I'm gonna put in my body, I have to weigh the benefit to, the harm.
Mhm.
And if I'm gonna take cannabis, instead of taking 5 pills a day, which the 5 pills will probably be much more detrimental to my health long term as far as like my liver and kidneys and everything else,
Mhm.
then that's what I'm going to do. If it comes to a point where it becomes unhealthy for me, because everything is an addiction. Everything is a habit, everything is a routine. Those three words are synonymous.
Mhm.
So if I'm working out, or if I'm freaking eating food, or if I'm in toxic relationships, or whatever it is that I'm doing, if if I'm doing it to the point where it is detrimental to my health, then that's when I know that I need to make some changes. You know, if I'm going to choose plants over pills for my particular situation, I have to weigh, like, is this better for me, my mental health, my physical state, my mental well-being,
Yep.
or is it more beneficial for me to continue to try, different pills and changing, different prescriptions and seeing if this works and that works and this works. And then I'm such in a vulnerable, fragile state early on in recovery that it's like I could explode at any moment,
Mhm.
and so all this judgment and stuff in the rooms and everything else, it's like I say, it has calmed down. Um, but somebody posted today on one of the sober groups, Cali Sober doesn't have any place in recovery or whatever. And it's like,
Out of here. Yeah.
you're it clearly states in the big book, we are but humble servants. We do not govern, and I told that person, I said, I said exactly that. I said, hey, you're just a humble servant. You do not govern. You can't, tell people, what is right for them, especially over the internet. You know what I mean? You're not like this person's sponsor, you're not in their freaking friends group, you're not in, like, you're not helping anybody by just announcing, this way of recovery is not valid, you know? And I told him, like, dude, I hate to tell you, bro, but I'm gonna go with my doctor's opinion of what I should be prescribed to over some like ex-convict, alcoholic that's in the rooms of AA that has no medical background. Like, you're
Yeah.
not gonna dictate how my recovery looks when you're not a doctor, for one, and
That
two, you don't know me from anybody.
Yeah, there's no context. And the other thing that drives me absolutely crazy is like, unless you're in a position physically, like to support that person through whatever you're about to say, then how dare you take initiative with what happens for the rest? Like, you know what I mean? Like if you're gonna say something that that person's gonna walk away from their computer or walk away from their phone and it's gonna like affect them negatively for absolutely no reason, like dude, can we love each other a little bit more than like sending people on tailspins for no reason? Like it
Yeah,
just drives me absolutely crazy. Like you're gonna sit there and say like you can't. That's not that that doesn't qualify as sober. Or, you worked all these months, all these days, all these hours, all these minutes, but it actually doesn't mean anything. Like I mean,
right.
what for what reason? Like what are you getting out of that? And you're gonna do all that, but you're actually not there to like help them through like the negative repercussions of you saying that. Like it's just
Absolutely.
has no
No,
place.
I agree. And I mean, for me personally, for that first year of my sobriety, of me being abstinent, 100%, well, I don't want to say 100% abstinent because I was, drinking the coffee and smoking the cigarettes and everything else. But,
Yeah.
um, I had at that point, I'd been through abstinence. I'd been through, you know, a rehab program based around neuroplasticity that teaches you, like, the habit loop, and how addictions are formed and all this stuff. And I had gotten sober and then relapsed and then fell back and relapsed so many times that I had experienced it all. I had done methadone, I had done Suboxone, I freaking went abstinent, I had done plant medicines, every avenue. And so when I see people recovering and they're like, oh yeah, this is what I'm doing, I can literally relate to almost anybody. I like when somebody's like, oh yeah, I'm coming off Suboxone, dude, I know what that's like.
Yeah.
I'm coming off methadone, or I'm freaking, I've been doing H for 4 years, and I have a gram a day habit, or I've, can't get off the coke, or I'm freaking whatever it is. The only thing I can't really speak on is meth and alcohol, because I
Oh.
never really struggled with those two things.
So you went
Um,
to AA without actually like so you went to AA meetings, sorry, for like instead of going to NA? Or did you go to NA?
well, so the sober living that I got into sober living, and that's where I was abstinent for 9 months. But as I was attending the sober living, it was a requirement for us to go to Alcoholics Anonymous. So we didn't have a choice.
Okay,
So that
interesting.
was just the meetings that, that's where I learned everything.
Right.
Once I had gotten, some stable footing, and once I was able to, actually leave the sober living on my own and do my own thing, I did check out some other meetings. And I mean, they're all about the same, and they're all just about as judgmental as the other ones,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
and then on top with the added freaking, we don't like AAers either, or like NAers or CAers. Like, they all have an issue with each other and how they all recover. And it's like, I mean, just read the freaking steps, man. It tells you if you got a problem with somebody, like, look within yourself and figure out, like, why is this person's recovery a threat to mine?
Right.
Because it shouldn't be. And if I'm gonna sit here and put this energy into, oh, that freaking guy isn't sober, like, who is that helping? Like, I'm over here holding a resentment, like, oh, that guy thinks he's freaking sober, but he's drinking, freaking 6 Red Bulls a day and 2 packs of cigarettes a day. And that's not sober, because your whole mind is freaking mood and mind altered, like, 24/7.
Yeah, totally.
You know what I mean? If I'm sitting here worrying about how this person recovers or how that person recovers, like, I'm not paying attention to how I'm doing.
Yeah.
And that'll take you out the fastest.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
when you're in that early stage of recovery, you can't help it. Like, you hold resentments, your freaking emotions are all over the place. You might be crying one second, laughing the next second. The emotions are like all flooding back. Your brain's readjusting to, this freaking deficiency of all your, serotonin and dopamine and whatever else. So it's trying to play catch up, but it doesn't know how, because we've been freaking self-regulating for so many years that it's like, is this enough? Is that enough? And it takes a while before it finally evens out, and it's like, oh, okay, here's where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah.
And during that time, you'll blow up on somebody for the silliest things.
It's
Or you'll
wild.
cry over the silliest things.
Yeah, I actually know some people that are addicted to detox. Like, so shout out to Wellbriety. I got really lucky in some of the communities that I've been involved in, and there's programs called Wellbriety, and they're kind of like an umbrella space. So it doesn't really matter what it is. It can be codependency, eating disorders, self-harm, whatever. You have a place there, and so their content is like very, very broad and kind of generic, but you can apply it to whatever it is that you're kind of going through. But it's like, I don't know what the heck the point of my story was, but yeah, shout out to Albrighty. The heck? Oh, because okay, so you're talking about like going through like the feeling as you're coming off of those, and like your hormones jumping back and forth and trying to like, your receptors trying to gain those connections and all of that stuff naturally, right? So obviously from like a depletion of whatever it is, whether it's like
Right.
dopamine or serotonin or whatever your DOC was, but that feeling that you get from actually trying to reconnect, like I know people that are actually that crave that feeling and go through depleting themselves from different DOCs to then go through that feeling of detox with the added of like feeling uncomfortable and the the sweats and the shakes and all of that. They will go through the physical part of it just to get that like mental. I was like, I need to talk to somebody about that because it's crazy.
That's some deep psychological.
Like,
Yeah.
about real self-harm, like I can't imagine that being easy on the brain or, anything like that. But yeah, there's
Absolutely not.
that actually enjoy that feeling. And I don't obviously suggest that to anybody.
Yeah.
That's going through that. It's already, you're already going through it. But yeah, it's amazing, like, what kind of comes out of that as you're trying to like regain those connections and things.
Yeah, it's a very dangerous road because, the more that you chase that feeling of like, oh, okay, well, I'm gonna, deplete myself and then, pick myself back up. It's only gonna last so long. I mean, I had done that so many times too, getting sober and then freaking doing well for a little bit. And the first time that I went through detox, cold turkey, I think it was like 7 days. After 7 days, I was up and about, running around, jumping up, but I was like 21.
Yeah.
Now I'm in my 30s, and this last time getting sober at 34, I was like it took me about a month or two before I was even sleeping like a full night,
Yeah.
and it was like it took a toll on my body. My body was struggling to repair itself
Mm.
because of the amount of damage that I did to myself. But on top of that, it's like the boy who cried wolf. Like you get down and out, and then you get sober, and everybody's proud of you, and you're like, oh yeah, this feels good. Like I'm doing good. Everybody's proud of me. Blah blah. But after the 10th time, people are gonna be like, yeah, you're just gonna relapse again, bro. Like I'm not even proud of you. Like you got 6 months? Okay, you've had 6 months 10 times now. Let's see you actually get a year or 2 years, or and so the people around you start to lose faith, and it's just like chasing the high of anything else. It's like, oh well, now I have to hit the most severe rock, like a more severe rock bottom than my last time, so that
Yeah.
so that they'll be proud of me because oh, well,
I'm
last
not
time you freaking OD'd under a bridge, but this time you were freaking dead for 5 days. Like how far are they willing to take it before they're like,
like,
it's like, oh wow, you came back. Oh, I'm so proud of you. And then it just gets worse and worse. And it's
yeah, you know what? I wonder if that's also part of like what they're talking about, because yeah, there is a lot of, of all that love, right? You haven't felt that love forever. People don't want to be around you. Your family doesn't want nothing to do with you. And then all of a sudden everyone's like back in your life, right? If you're in detox, people are like, do you need a pack of smokes? Like, what do you need? Right? Like, do you want
right.
me to bring you that blanket from home? Like, do you need
Now
new?
imagine having like a freaking volatile relationship,
Mm.
either with your partner or with, your parents or whoever you're surrounded by, who is also, a toxic environment to be around while you're going through this thing,
Yeah.
and I mean, it's got to be a freaking a mind, like, just, yeah, that would break my brain. Having to go through all of that on top of freaking, having like a toxic environment to try and recover in, and
No.
you're just like, feelings are here, your person is here while you're here, and you're unmedicated or too medicated or whatever it is, and it's just a recipe for freaking
House
failure.
mayhem. Yeah. The one thing that I don't think is talked enough about though is like normalizing the feelings of being in detox. Like I'd really, convinced like you get chicken skin or whatever you want to call it
Mhm.
for other reasons. Like, whatever I mean, when it's cold out, you're gonna get goosebumps. Like
Mhm.
when when you're dancing, like you sweat. Like
Right.
when you get a stomach bug or something like that, like you might have tummy problems. Like it was like once you can start understanding that like those symptoms are actually like natural responses to completely like run of the mill day to day stuff. Um,
Yeah.
I don't think that there's enough conversation about that, because as soon as those symptoms kick in, like I think it contributes a lot to like why people relapse, or why people don't even want to get clean anyways. And I mean, obviously that goes without saying, right? People like start getting sick, especially when we talk about opiates, and then immediately you're like, you got to fix that feeling.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I had a really bright person say to me, like, if you can associate those feelings with like just totally regular things.
Mhm.
And it was like, oh, wait
I
a second.
agree.
Like,
I
wait,
agree
okay.
100%. Like I started using when I was 15 years old, until I was 34.
Mhm.
And so for the majority of my life, I was on drugs,
Right.
and so literally everything that I was doing, I associated to, how I felt on drugs, because that's really all I knew at this point. I mean, you don't really remember much from, you might have flashbacks or whatever but like from 15 on to when you were born, that's the space where you have the least, or at least for me, I had the least amount of like real, epic memories.
Mm,
And
yeah.
so growing up, on substances all the time, you know, like you said, having a freaking stomach ache, or just feeling anxious, or just, getting the flu,
Yeah.
and you're like, oh man, I'm freaking withdrawing, but I've been sober, 3 years. It's a really freaking, it's a, it's a, t- I don't know. It really just goes to show, like, how we associate our feelings
Mhm.
to, that specific scenario. And when you decide that you want to get sober, you have to completely change everything. And my perspective on getting sober was, I want to experience everything I possibly can now, sober, because I don't even know what that's like. It's like I'm starting over a whole new life. And honestly, it was scary. And I think that is a big reason why a lot of people are afraid to get sober, is because if you really want to be successful, you got to change everything. Change your way of thinking, change your surroundings, change, your habits, your routines. Everything has to change. And I understood that idea of just how you were talking, those receptors that are looking for, something to cling on to, those neurological passages that are like, that help us create new patterns and new habits. And I really understood that and was like, okay, by not continuing to use, I'm pulling apart these neurological passages. You know, these triggers, as we call them, they're not even, we call them triggers because, yeah, they make us feel a certain way, but we feel
Right.
that way because we have associated it with that object. Like I get triggered when I freaking, hold a spoon just like this, or I see a bent spoon or whatever, and it's a trigger. Is it really a trigger?
Oh
Or
man.
is it just because we have lived in that lifestyle for so long that it's a memory?
It's
You know,
yes.
I drive by and I see a shovel on the ground. I might remember that shovel later on in my life. I'm like, oh, that looks just like that same orange shovel I saw a couple months ago. Does it mean that it's a trigger that I want to go and dig a ditch? No, it's just a memory. And that's one thing that I had to really, understand, is like, dude, you were doing drugs for 18 years. A lot of things are going to remind you of drugs. Does it mean that I want to get high? No, it just means that, oh, I remember a time when I, used to do things that involved that same object.
I wonder why we call negative memories triggers. Because as you were saying that, all I kept thinking about was like when we talk about, the smell of like bread cooking,
Mm.
like I mean, it triggers a good memory, right? Like it's like a positive thing. And like why do we it's interesting that we like just associate it because obviously if there was a negative memory, not all, drug or alcohol memories are bad either. So I don't want to like, go down that road saying that like everyone's addiction is all this negative stuff. We have to give ourselves a
Right.
little bit of credit because it is just life. Um, but it's interesting that it like that we have to, if it's negative, then it has to be this like massive, massive thing. Like, because if it was a loaf of bread, you would just be like, oh yeah, that reminded me of this, and then just like go on with your day, right? It wouldn't
Absolutely.
be like this big like, oh my God, I can't, handle or I need to find something to cope or like yeah.
Yeah, and that's a really great observation, because the difference is that when we're in early recovery, so most of the time, the substances that we're abusing will flood our frontal cortex, which is where we make all those decisions. Like I'm sure you've said this so many times, man, I would have never done that if I wasn't on drugs.
Yeah.
And that is quite literally what's happening in the brain, is that the dopamine in the brain is being just flooded into your frontal cortex, which clouds your decision making. And so you start to rationalize, that these things are okay that you wouldn't normally do.
Mhm.
And that decision making, that freaking impulse control,
Right.
that's where it is. And when you're in early recovery, that frontal cortex hasn't yet regulated, like we were talking about. And so it's easy to fall back into relapse because your frontal cortex is having troubles regulating your impulse control. And so
Mm.
you might get a memory of something that you used to do when you were using, and you're like, oh, there's that memory. But because my impulse control is down here, because I'm in early recovery, it's hard for me to say no. And so I'm going to do that impulse control. And the longer time through sobriety that you have, you start to regulate that impulse control. And now they're just memories.
Yeah.
I don't feel like going out and using because I see, I have to drug test people at the sober living, or I have to confiscate drugs, or I have to freaking, like I can hold a baggie of dope in my hand and
Yeah.
not be like, oh, I'm going to put this in my pocket and say that I flushed it, like
Yeah.
impulse control.
Man, isn't that a good feeling? Congratulations to that feeling. That's wicked, like to get to that place. Because once you get there, it's like, it just
It's
feels unstoppable,
amazing.
right? Yeah. Today I had something really bothered me. And I was like, it was so stupid, but it bothered me. And I got up and I was like, went to go, whatever, put on the kettle. And I was like, man, that really bugged me. And then it dawned on me, I was like, I don't remember the last time that I woke up like pissed off. Like I don't remember the last time that I had like a bad day. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
obviously things happen and like life happens and it's, whatever. But
Right.
like I was like, man, am I that spoiled that it's been that long that I actually am like aware that I'm having kind of like an off day? Like it's crazy because when you're in it, it's like everything is crazy. Everything is trauma. Everything is drama.
Right.
Everything is like, man, it's like once you get to the other side of it, like yeah, today was like, and to be honest, it wasn't even, it was nothing crazy, like whatever. But it was like the fact that I had realized that was like, it had, that I was actually having like a moment. And I was like, man,
Mhm.
I'm so spoiled. Like, I'm so spoiled. It's been so long. I didn't even remember what this felt like. Like, it's
Yeah,
crazy.
I think that's really amazing. My sister, when I decided to get sober, my sister provided me a safe place to actually recover,
Mhm.
and it was she literally saved my life, and people had tried to help me previously, and I just wasn't ready yet. But at this time, I give a lot of credit to my sister, even though my mom helped me a lot. But my sister really created a space for me where she was like, look, I don't even care what you do. Like, you don't have to get a job. You don't have to make your bed. You don't have to do chores. I don't care what you do. All I want you to do is just like sit on my couch for a couple months so that I can stop worrying about whether you're going to, die.
Wow.
So just like stay here and like recover,
Yeah.
get off the drugs, freaking find yourself, do whatever it is you have to do, and just survive for a little bit,
Mm,
so that freaking so that mom and I can freaking just like,
chill out.
stop freaking worrying. I was like, okay, cool. And she was a yoga instructor, a master yoga instructor. And so she was into, the chakras and sound frequency and sound healing and, the cheese and all these freaking spiritual modalities. And so I started doing yoga with her, meditating and exercising, and she started teaching me sound healing with like Tibetan singing bowls. And you know, I started to explore this idea of like frequency, like why does it make me, why does music make you feel things?
Mhm.
Why is it that when you hear a song that you really like come on, you have that freaking feeling, that dopamine rush, and you're like, where does that come from? I started to look into frequencies and, different philosophies on, the law of attraction and, um, you know, karmic balance and all these things. And I started to really notice patterns throughout my life of like when it's weird, my brain kind of sees things mathematically, but I can see patterns in my life where during my addictions, and you start to put the philosophies of karma and, the law of attraction into play, just like you were saying, we look back and we see these times where we were constantly in this negative cycle, and the universe will literally give you what it is that you thrive in. So, me being this low vibrational frequency being, living constantly in shame and guilt and depression and, deception and all these things that are low level frequency emotions, when I'm thriving and I'm surviving and every single day is just like feels like an accomplishment that I survived this day, the universe is like, "Oh, you're thriving in this environment? Well, let me continue to give it to you." And when I got sober and I started to understand that way of thinking and the law of attraction, I stopped stealing stupid little things that I didn't need at the store. I stopped doing these tiny little things that were low vibrational frequency things that were going to return my karmic balance. And so I started to raise myself out of this negative vibration. I started to feel good that I didn't, you know, steal a candy bar from Walmart. Like when I was using or whatever, I'd be like, I don't care, it's Walmart. And sure, it's Walmart, but is it honest? And for me, it doesn't feel honest. Whatever it is, I don't care. If you're everybody's in a different situation. If I was starving, my brain might impulse control rationalizing something, stealing something. But because I have the money to pay for it,
Mhm.
Not paying for it would be dishonest, which would be a low vibrational thing. So I'm not going to do it. And the more that I raise myself on this vibrational plane, I'm getting higher and higher out of depression and shame and guilt into happiness and love and joy and whatever else. Then I start to also attract those things.
Yeah.
So waking up happier, being happier, accomplishing more things, freaking just having that energy of a positive frequency. People feel that when you talk, people hear it, and just like music, when people say something good, it holds power. Just like when you say to somebody, I hate you, you have that feeling of like, ooh, ouch, that hurts. It has power compared to I love you, I care about you, I want to see you succeed. That has so much more power. And so I started to think in those terms, like constantly trying to, you know, raise my vibration. And the more that I did that, the more the universe was like, "Oh, like succeeding in this environment. Let me give you more." So then I got more and more friends and more opportunities and better job opportunities and raises and all these things just started flooding, and not because I was asking for them, but simply because I was, you know, embodying what I wanted to attract. I was putting out what I wanted to attract. And I mean it works. It absolutely works.
Yeah, and also putting yourself in a place to receive, right? Like, I mean, if you are in a place where you can like actually take on these like blessings and these gifts and these like wonderful things that people, make available to you because you're in a space where you can actually utilize them properly. It's like a whole different thing. Like, I mean, you can go and socialize and network all you want, but if you're not in a place to like have those conversations, then it's kind of beating a dead horse, right? Like it
Mhm.
sounds like you had a similar experience than I did. I got really lucky. Like my these two really really amazing women, and uh, one has sounds very similar to your sister, and she had all the same things like in her space, including this beautiful library, and I had nothing but time. And then across the road was my other person, and she had horses, and she was like,
Nice.
"You got nothing but time to like,
Horses are amazing.
uh,
Horses hold an amazing healing frequency.
yeah, absolutely. And so I always joke like, people are like, "What are you doing in Alberta?" And I'm like, "Horses are cheaper than heroin." Like, to me, they're cheaper than heroin. And maybe not always because you can spend as much money as you want, but what they give back is like, all the dopamine in the world. And when you can like
Right.
find a place to kind of like connect, with animals, and or music, both of those things, they're important to me. I mean, my my business is based on music. But that's not to say that when I don't like step out of the office, I go straight to the horses. Like those are two things that are just like surmountable. But my point is that once I became in a place to receive those things, then I could
Mhm.
like truly heal. Because you can go and put yourself in those places all you want, but if you're not ready to like take them on in like a 360 sort of way, then you're just in that space. Like, so I
Yeah.
think it's really cool to hear that you got to that place where you could like receive those things from other people. It's
Yeah, you have to feel worthy of receiving. You know what I mean? But I really liked what you said about getting the dopamine from the horses because, you know, that is every single person on this planet's number one motivator. Whether we acknowledge it or not, literally everything that we do is for those chemicals, those feel good chemicals. We build relationships with people because we want to feel good. We want those people to feel like we care. We want to feel like we're cared for. And when we feel that way, those chemicals are released. Same thing happens when you do drugs. You do drugs and dopamine is released. And that's why, our brain rationalizes, oh, well, why would I build a relationship with somebody that's going to take time and effort and, all this stuff? I could just buy a bag of dope. So we start to rationalize, well, I could just get that same feeling from, spending $10 or $50 or whatever.
yeah.
So why would I spend the time and effort to do that? But being that every single person on this planet is their brains are wired to chase dopamine, every single thing that we do, whether it's working out or, getting a raise at the job or building a relationship or whatever it is, we're looking for that dopamine. I build a relationship with a girl so that I can fall in love, so that I can feel those chemicals. And so every single thing that we do is for dopamine. Now, where, to tie it back is this detrimental to my health? If I'm chasing the dopamine, am I, overindulging in food because I get that dopamine? Am I freaking working out to a point where it's not healthy for me, and I'm, neglecting my health because of, my figure? I might not be eating as much so that I could lose weight, or freaking whatever it is, and then I get that dopamine rush from looking at my gains in the mirror or whatever. Where does that dopamine chase, the habit, the routine, the addiction, where does that chase become detrimental to your health? And like I said earlier, to tie it back, that's the decisions that I make now. Is this detrimental to my health? Is this helping, or is this healing me right now? And that's why I can use cannabis and say, well, my other alternative is much more detrimental to my health. And the other alternative of not going medicated is even more detrimental, because then my impulse control, and then I'll end up trying to feel normal, because of my mental health. And then I'll end up doing something, that my brain just like rationalizes. I don't know if you've ever been starving.
Yes.
Yeah. So, once you're to that point where your stomach is just, your brain starts to alter your way of thinking, and you're like, I'm so hungry, I would literally do anything. Like I would steal, or I would hurt somebody, or I would, do something that I wouldn't usually do if I wasn't this hungry. And it's the same mentality that your brain has on drugs. Like, I need that dopamine, and I don't care what I got to do, whether it's hurt you or hurt myself or steal something, like I'm gonna do it. It's that same starving mentality.
Yeah, I'm glad you said it like that, because a lot of people don't understand. Like, it's one thing to say like it's a disease, or it's a choice, or whatever, and like it's all of those things and more. Depending on who you are and what the situation is and whatever. But when you describe it in a way that other people can understand, like starving is a universal thing. People go through it for not because of drugs, right? And so when you can associate it with that feeling, it's like you start thinking irrational things. Like that is the exact as like, I got to get that bag, I got to get that situation, I got to get that comfort level. Like, even before you start getting sick, even before you start whatever, it's like trying to get that rush back to like feel that warm blanket feeling. It's crazy that it creates it in such an artificial way, though, that you're not even in like in an extreme place, like, because you're not with drugs, like maybe your lifestyle is extreme, but because it's so artificial, like when you look around, it's like you got a blanket, you got a house, maybe there's some food in the fridge, maybe not, because drugs will take all of that, but like it's crazy that you get to that like starvation feeling long before you're actually like in an emergency situation. Like
Well, yeah, and on top of that, those substances are literally designed to do that. They call them freaking designer drugs. They
Yes.
are designed to do that. They're designed to, overstimulate the mind, or, block your receptors, or whatever it is. Like, that's what they're designed to do. And used in the right appropriate time, it might help you. Giving somebody Adderall who has ADHD, it might help them. But if you give it to somebody that's not in an appropriate setting, somebody who doesn't have a mental health condition, then they're going to be overstimulated. And that's when the freaking disorder starts.
Yeah, thank you for breaking it down like that. I think it's super important to like hear it from that perspective. Because a lot of people don't understand it from that place. And like, we kind of get like the textbook, and a lot of that is textbook, but to have it come back from a person who's experienced it from like a whole bunch of different aspects is nice and palatable. So thank you for like explaining it.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Just real quick, shout out to everybody that's in the comment section. I didn't throw them up tonight, but Let's Five TV and everyone over at Scar Nation and Manny with My Fight Our War. You guys are wicked, and like, thank you so much. Keep doing all the good stuff that you guys are doing. It doesn't go unnoticed. That's for sure. But
Yeah, thank you for the comments.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of beautiful ones out there. Usually I throw them up, but we were talking so good, and I was like, I'm not interested.
No, I mean, you know, I just, like I said, I have a strong foundation in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I've done so many different treatment plans and things like that that I kind of have just pieced together this tool belt, you know, of ideas and what keeps me sober, you know. And so, like, for me, it's really easy to just kind of regurgitate whatever it is that I use, you know,
Right.
and try to explain it in a way that made sense to me.
Well, it's definitely important. And it's interesting, this like new wave of like recovery influencers that's kind of come out of the woodwork
I
because,
love it.
man, it's deadly. Like,
When I
it's
came out 3 years ago, there was, you know, a handful of us, you
yeah,
know, and I was the only one out there saying, you know, Cali Sober.
right.
And now
Yeah,
I see it and I'm like, "Heck yeah, it's growing." You know,
it's a
it's
thing,
growing.
man.
And I'm
It's
happy. I can't be mad at it, you know, it's taking away from my views, but I can't be mad at it. No, I'm you know, that's all that I really wanted to do. That's all the whole reason I started doing social media was really just to journal my own, you know, my own journey,
yeah,
because I struggle with journaling, like writing things down.
yeah,
And so I was like, well, I'll just start doing like a daily video of, you know, how I'm feeling, where I'm at right now. So I can see, you know, I can look back in a year and see where I was at, where my thinking was and everything like that. It might be, you know, because TikTok saves everything, like
right.
whatever, maybe freaking technology is that, you know, in 50 years, my grandkids will freaking see my TikTok and be like, oh, look, there's all these videos of what he was going through. Like, I don't freaking know. But that's why I started doing it, you know,
Yeah,
and then I started seeing people, you know, start making recovery content, you know, talking about, you know, how they recover. And I find it really amazing that I may have helped inspire some people to talk about their journey, and that hopefully their journey has inspired somebody else. And that's more than I could ever hope for. You know, like I never dreamed that I would have close to 1 million followers across my platforms. I was just being transparent and honest. And, you know, like I said, having such a strong foundation in Alcoholics Anonymous and seeing the holes in it and where it doesn't make sense, like no mood or mind altering substances, but freaking birth control is mood or mind altering, you know, little inconsistencies like that, that I was like, well, no. Like, you're either lying to people and telling them that you're abstinent, but you're actually on some mood or mind altering substance, which is a terrible message to send to people, because that's saying, well, I'm raw dogging, you know, sobriety, so you have to too. But in fact, I'm over here freaking self-medicating with, you know, 2 packs of cigarettes and a bunch of Red Bull and freaking
yeah.
whatever else every single day. Like, that's not,
17 chocolate bars. Like,
yeah.
yeah,
So I just started, you know, speaking my mind, and people were like, "Yeah, thank you." I can't tell you how many people have reached out to me and been like, "Hey, you know, please don't post this message, you know, but thank you for what you do, because I work at a rehab program, or I'm in recovery and my freaking AA family doesn't accept it, or whatever, or this or that." You know, like I'm in hiding of how I recover in fear of judgment, you know, and that's more detrimental than anything.
yeah.
That
It's
having to be dishonest and having to hide how we recover, because the moment that it blows up, because it likely will, that person's gonna go right back to relapse. Oh,
yeah,
well, everybody freaking, oh, the secret's out now that I, you know, am on mental health medications, and everybody's saying that I'm not sober now. So if I lost my sobriety and I can't go back to AA without feeling like I have to start over, and I have to, you know, go pick up that 1 day chip, and I have lost my sobriety date, and I have to, you know, all this and all that, why wouldn't I just freaking go back to using?
yeah. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. Like, it's crazy. I remember going through YouTube trying to find something to explain to me what it was that I was like about to get myself into, trying to help a friend. Like, because long before it was anything to me, like it was before maybe even the opiate epidemic. Like, I had someone in my life who was going through detox, and the only thing I knew was what they were telling me, and they weren't telling me everything because they didn't want, and we don't. And I was like on YouTube trying to figure it out. And there was this dude, Lance Rice, I think his name was. And he was the only dude out there. Like he like, took us through a journey of him detoxing off of opiates. And I was just like, holy moly, like this is insane. And then I turned around and went back, and I was like, and I honestly don't know whatever happened to him. I should look for him actually. I don't know whatever happened to him. I think he had maybe like 200 views on like one or two videos or something like that. And then when I started looking for that information again, because I was like, okay, like I need to get the same information. I'm in this position again. And there was people like you and everybody else that's out there. And I was just like, thank goodness. Like, thank goodness. Because not only are you guys putting out content that is informative and helping people that are like, even just supporting people that are going through it. But yeah, you definitely to make that platform that's like wide open for like all sorts of conversation. It's saving lives. And that I know for sure, because the stigma that comes with getting clean in any way, shape, or form is what definitely keeps people sick. So yeah, so thank you so much for like being out there and putting your stuff out there for everybody to like, check out and all of that stuff. I'm sure it can't be that easy. Well, I know it's not that easy. I mean, like I do it in like a smaller way, and like I just it's like life saving and life changing, that's for sure. So yeah, thank you so much for
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's very fulfilling, just getting messages that are from people that are like, hey, your videos helped me when I was going through it, or like, that really stuck with me when I was, getting sober or whatever. That's really that's the whole reason why I do it. And I'm very fortunate, that I have humbled myself over the years to know that there is no one way. Like I'm not out here saying, hey, you guys, everybody who's on, substances or alcohol, like you got to do cannabis, you got to do the plant. I'm not saying anybody has to do anything. I'm only here to share what has worked for me, and I think that's the most important thing, is not telling people, hey, this is what you should do. Just, hey, this is what's working for me. Now, if you want to try it, if you're like me and you've tried literally everything else, maybe try this. If you haven't tried Suboxone, maybe try that. If you haven't tried abstinence, maybe try that. If you haven't tried going to an AA meeting, maybe try that. I'm just here saying, figure it out. There's a way for everybody. You just have to figure out what it is, and unfortunately, a lot of us don't have the resources to go and get evaluated by a mental health professional and figure out that they have mental health conditions, and that's why they can't control their impulses, or, and I think that that's why Amsterdam has done so well with, their legalization of all drugs, is because instead of spending the money on this war on drugs that doesn't work, because the biggest drug dealer is Big Pharma, what they do is they spend money on providing people with mental health coverage. So if you've got an issue, you go and see your freaking psychiatrist or your therapist or your doctor or whatever, and they help you. And that's why it's so successful, is because instead of saying, hey, everybody needs rehabilitation, no, what they need is therapy. And once you heal from whatever it is that you're craving to escape and numb and validate for, then you don't have the drug problem.
It's crazy. Like, why have we not jumped on board with all of that? I have no idea. And to see the results, I mean, they are as clear as day. So, I mean, it's time. BC tried. I don't know if you guys heard much about like what's happening up in Canada. Like BC tried, but they went about it in like a really not a great way. I don't want to talk ill about people trying new things, but like it wasn't correct. And because it was provincial and not necessarily like a federal situation, it was like met with all sorts of like nonsense and whatever. But I mean, the wheel exists. Amsterdam already knows what's up, and so why we haven't kind of stepped on board and started treating it as like a mental health crisis, which is exactly what it is. I really don't understand.
Yeah.
I think
I don't want to like get banned for saying, some crazy freaking conspiracy stuff, but I mean, it's very apparent. I don't know if you saw the documentary about OxyContin or whatever, but it was very blatant that the people over at Purdue knew and were actually designing, just like we were saying earlier, designing these drugs to provide these effects so that people would get hooked to them. They were even doing like studies on, how people reacted to, they'd be like, okay, when you hear morphine, what do you think? And they'd be like, oh, I think of sedative. I think of, these words, they're like, tell me the first 5 words that come to your mind. And so they're going through these names, morphine and heroin, and, they get to, okay, what do you think about OxyContin? And they're like, oh, oxy, that sounds like oxygen. It kind of sounds fluffy. I mean, they literally design these things to be appealing to people, and so this whole idea of, well, what if we just legalized everything? Well, that would be great, but what they're failing to do, because they're doing that in Oregon now, they've fully legalized everything, but everything, it's become chaos over there because they're not doing it like Amsterdam. They're saying, oh yeah, sure, everything is legal now, so go ahead, do what you want. Whoever they is that probably also controls, a portion of the pharmaceutical company, I think it's to show them like this isn't going to work. Like, if we legalize everything, it's just going to become this mass chaos, because we need you guys, like, we need to regulate, we need to do all these things, we need to make sure that the pills and the this and the that and the, but what they're not doing is focusing on the mental health part. Like, they've legalized all the drugs, but they're not actually spending that money that they're no longer spending on the war on drugs to prosecute, low crimes. They're not taking that money and using it on mental health to rehabilitate these people and to work on the mental health problem before it arises into, an addiction. So
exactly.
it's kind of an interesting conspiracy that they're like, oh yeah, we're going to do it. And we're
Yeah,
going to show you whether it works or not, but it's clearly not working. And they're going to say, oh, well, that wasn't the answer. Like, we're just too big, or
that's
we're just this, or we're just that. But the fact is they're not doing it right.
this is exactly what they're doing, and then they're using it as a reason to like fold the whole thing. And it's like I actually started writing a letter to city council just for one town. So I'm like, I'm just gonna try one town that's getting hit really hard and just like see if I can't make some movement. So actually I know the mayor, and I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna put it out there. But what I find so frustrating is that they did all of this, and then they don't want to do the psych evaluations. And when they do the psych evaluation, so if you push and you're saying like, I don't want this person back in my house, they're unstable, whether it's mental health or addiction or whatever you want to call it, it doesn't really matter. In this instance, we just want a 72-hour put on them so that they're evaluated. So if they get through that evaluation and say best, best case scenario, they get a diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
If they're not welcome back at the property they left, so say like the person's just like, nah, I need a minute, then your two options is a voucher to get a cab to one of 2 homeless shelters. Like, what?
Right.
Like, what? Wait, like, wait a second. Like, there is no option to go to a detox center. There is no option to go to like a sober living facility. And I know that a lot of that comes like you need to go through a detox bed first. And a lot of the, facilities are like that. I know the chain of command is kind of broken, and there's a lot to be talked about with that. But just specifically, this one break in the situation, whereas if you go and get a 72-hour, then you get a free voucher in a cab, and your only 2 options are one of 2 shelters, and they're not even in the same town. So the crazy part is that like, so you get into the cab and you get to pick A or B, and they both take you to like these like crazy areas that are like not close to your house, that aren't close to your family, that aren't close to even they picked you up from. Like out here, they're picking you up, say, we'll just use like Edmonton and Calgary are like 2 major cities. They're both in the same province, right? And in between them is this other kind of like smaller city, but still a pretty big metropolis. If they pick you up in, say, Red Deer, which is smack dab in the middle, they won't take you back there. You get a choice of one or the other city's homeless shelters, like an hour and a half away. And so you think like these people they already don't have transportation. There's a reason
Mhm.
why that you pick them up in the first place. They're going through a mental health crisis. They're already, it's a burden to their family, or their family has like, tapped out on the situation. And then the solution is to like, one, either give them a diagnosis or not, and then turn them to a shelter.
Yeah. Calico said people get set up to fail, and I agree with that so much. I mean, we there's a lot of relapse that happens when people are trying to recover. It's a unfortunate common event, but what I don't agree with is that, a lot of places you relapse and they
Mhm.
will kick you out.
Yes.
And it's like that is the worst thing that you could do to somebody who is, you know, talking again about, the mind and impulse control and the frontal cortex and all these things. Somebody who's early into recovery, they're relapsing because of the impulse control, because of that obsession is still there. And then you tell them, okay, well, you can't be here anymore. Like we're gonna kick you out. And then they go out on the streets and they're broken. They feel helpless and hopeless and all these things, and then they freaking go out and relapse and they end up dying. And it's not the answer. And I think that there's a lot of things that need to be fixed in the whole rehabilitation genre. At Men's Tribal House, the sober living that we work with, it's one thing if you relapse and you lie about it. If you get confronted and you lie about it, you're gone,
Mhm.
because mistakes happen and we can forgive mistakes. And this is what I tell all the guys, like, look, dude, I already know, I have eyes and ears everywhere. If you just tell me, you know, if you tell me the truth, that says a lot more about your character. That says that you're willing to be accountable for your actions and you want to get better. And that I can forgive, and that I can continue to put my time and effort into. But if you're going to lie to me when I have, when I know that you relapsed, that I can't forgive,
Yeah.
because that's a blatant slap in my face. So if you freaking relapse, like, we're going to work on why you relapsed. And if you're going to freaking sit there and lie to me, then you don't really want to get help and you
That
don't belong here.
the standard
What's
everywhere.
that?
It needs to be the
Yeah.
standard. It needs to be the standard. Like you relapse and you're willing to take on responsibility and, step up to it. Like, why is that not the standard? Like that should just be the standard. You guys are doing great stuff over there, honestly. And it's
Thanks.
so impressive to me. Yeah, you're welcome. You guys were out there like doing some cool stuff the other day, and I was like, you guys are out there actually living life. Like pardon me, to be in a house and actually get to see what life is like on the outside, I think is so important for these people. I think it's so important, especially for men. I'm a massive dude advocate,
Mhm.
honestly, and like my business is actually called Men's Mental Health and Music. But
Nice.
that's besides the point. Yeah, thank you. But I just think that it's so great to like have people actually like go into that environment and then also be able to be part of like society on the outside and experience like those beautiful things. I think it's probably a lot quicker to start building those connections on a hormone and a chemical standpoint. I can't imagine anything quicker to like, get your dopamine producing dopamine naturally than to just get out there and start living life. And it's just not the standard everywhere. Like, unfortunately, a lot of things that happen in recovery houses happen behind closed doors. And, it is what it is. But yeah, shout out to you guys for like getting out there and like doing the
Thank
thing.
you. Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, when I went to sober living, we wouldn't like do activities. We wouldn't freaking go. Like, the only thing that we would do is go to, we had to make at least 4 meetings a week. So that was where we got our dopamine,
Oh,
being out and being social and, whatever else. But for me, what the most important thing was, healing that obsession to escape. And that obsession to escape came from the fact that I didn't like the life that I had.
yeah.
And so once we start to build a life that we no longer want to escape, that
Mhm.
obsession just starts to disappear. And that for me, that's why I take these guys on these activities. I take them to, hiking trails and hot springs and, freaking just activities that get that dopamine going that isn't through substances. Because then once you start to learn like, oh, I really liked freaking paddle boarding the lake, or I really liked fishing, or I really liked, hiking the mountain, or, doing some indoor skydiving, or whatever it is, like, then you start to have things to look forward to. Like, oh yeah, I want to do that again. And instead of saying, oh, I never want to do anything again, and I just want to like sit on a couch and nod out, instead I have things that I don't want to escape from. Like, I got things I can look forward to. I have purpose. I have, some goals, some ambition. And it's like, once we start to build that life that we no longer want to escape from, that's when it clicks. And it's like, oh, well, do I want to freaking use and have this temporary happiness for a few hours, this flood of dopamine and everything else, at the cost of losing everything that I've built to get here? And when you're on substances, you have nothing to lose. You don't have a house, you don't have a car, you don't have, or at least it gets to that point, and it did for me many times. But when my decision was like, hey, look, dude, I have nothing to lose. I don't have a car. I don't have, a house or a girlfriend or, family or whatever that, I'm in contact with, whatever. Like, I'm not losing anymore. And so it's easy for me to continue to make that choice. Well, I don't stand to lose my job. I don't stand to lose my relationship. I don't stand to, lose my car or whatever. Like, it's easier for me to just continue to use. But once you start to have these responsibilities and you're like, oh, well, I built the trust with my family. I've, built a good relationship with my significant other. I've, finally got some trust, and they gave me the keys to the work truck. I'm finally gaining some trust and, all this stuff. And then you weigh it, like, all this stuff, is it worth this temporary happiness?
Mm-hmm.
And then you start to say, no, I'm going to choose, what I've built, this life that I've built. I don't want to escape. I don't want to ruin everything that I've built. So I'm going to continue to make the right choice.
Yeah. Yes. Until it actually just isn't even a choice anymore. Like, I mean, I can't speak for everybody, but there really is a place on the other side when you're living a life you don't want to escape from, much like you say. Like, if you're living that life, then the conversation doesn't really come up with yourself anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like today, and it's not to say that it maybe it won't, but today was really the first time in years that I was like, I'm having an off day. Like, like, am I that spoiled that I've just gone this long without having like an off day? And to be honest, the first thought wasn't using. It wasn't even, I don't even know if that actually crossed my mind. It was just acknowledging that maybe it wasn't like a perfect morning, like
Mm-hmm.
there is solace in that. Like, you can work, you can get there. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And it's really cool that you give these wonderful human beings the opportunity to feel human again.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm trying my best.
Yeah, you're
doing my best out here. Continuing to spread the word. Thank you, Calico. I appreciate that. Yeah, we're actually working on an RV today. So we do a service project.
Yeah.
We try and help some people, once a week. And this week I decided, maybe you guys can help me. And so I brought the RV down there, and we're trying to convert the RV into like a mobile haircut and shower for the less fortunate or the people experiencing homelessness. So, we'll just pull up to a homeless camp or whatever and offer people like, hey, does anybody need a haircut? Does anybody, need to take a shower? Taking a shower for me when I was in active addiction was something that I didn't have the luxury to do for long periods of time.
Mm-hmm.
I think probably the longest I went without showering one time was like 2 months.
Yeah.
And so being able to provide those things for people, is important to me. And so when I can get the Men's Tribal House to help get this RV ready to then help other people, and we start making videos and showing people, how, we're helping other people, and they see those videos and they're like, oh, heck yeah, I was a part of that. I helped build that RV. I helped put that RV together so that we could help these people. Then you start to feel some sense of like, happiness or like, some sense of gratification that you did something for somebody else without having to, get something in return.
Yeah, I'm a huge believer in that. We do it a lot, actually, like a lot of our stuff. Oh,
My
hello.
cat wanted to say hi.
Do that. Your cat's name.
Hello, Mr. James.
But yeah,
But yeah.
that's super cool. I think it's super rad. The sense of belonging that comes when you're like, helping someone with a project, or the sense of accomplishment and achievement and all of that stuff. Like that's exactly what it's exactly what people need to be doing. And the sense of purpose is exactly why people stay on the life to like recovery, and the road to recovery, and the life you don't need to recover from, and all that good stuff. So I think, yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, definitely.
Mhm.
Service work was probably doing something for other people was that first thing for me that gave me a rush that was better than drugs, that I was like, oh wow,
Yeah.
like I never experienced this before. Like this is what they're talking about. Like this is that, sense of purpose.
Yeah.
I was helping this person who was one of the directors of the Salvation Army, the guys that ring the bells in the Christmas suits and stuff outside the Walmarts and whatnot. And he was like, hey, come on, we're going to go ring the bell at this event downtown in Savannah, Georgia. We're sitting there ringing the bell at this concert, like where all these high-end, higher class people had paid for the whole thing. So they all had like their front tables right next to the stage, lawyers and attorney or judges and, important people.
Mhm.
And one of the guys gets up from the table and he comes and he puts a 20 in the bucket. And he's like, hey, I saw you guys are with the Salvation Army. I just want to tell you guys, thank you so much for what you do. And he's like, my son is in the program right now. But I'm looking at this guy and he's got freaking, $1,000 pair of shoes on and a Rolex and everything else. And I quickly understood, like, this is one of those situations where the family was wealthy, but he'd been to freaking 20 rehabs in the last 5 years and nothing works. And finally they were like, look, we just can't help. We just can't help you anymore. Like, we've been trying for so long and all this money that we're throwing to help you isn't working. So, you got to do it on your own. Or maybe he went to prison and that was his only option to go to the Salvation Army. Salvation Army is one of the most rigid recovery programs that you can do. I think something like 6% graduate the program because it's hard.
Yeah.
I mean, you're if you're not out on work release, you're on lockdown, on the facility 24/7. They have a courtyard that you can go out on, but I mean, you're not leaving the place and it's free. But it's like the most rugged recovery program. Anyway, I understood that this kid was there because his dad was like, look, I can't do anything anymore. And so he's sitting there talking to me, and I understand that this guy is very wealthy and that he's just come to a point where, he's at the end of his rope with his kid and whatever else. And I tell him, I'm in recovery and I'm out here helping doing service work, and as we're talking, his wife comes up and she starts talking to me too. And I mean, growing up in a very volatile household, I'm very aware of micro expressions on people's, facial features and things like that. And so they were making very strong eye contact with me the entire time. And I just felt the energy of like, as I'm telling my story, I felt the energy of like, this is what we hope that our kid will achieve someday, and the mom is sitting there getting teary eyed and stuff. And we're like, I'm so proud of you and like keep going and all these things. And, she gives me a hug. They both give me a hug. And I knew they weren't hugging me.
No.
They were hugging the vision of their kid within me, and what they hope that their kid will achieve. And when they hugged me though, like the energy that they gave me, I got this rush. I'm actually getting goosebumps thinking about it right now. It was a high that I never experienced on drugs. for like a good 5 seconds, my whole body just was like tingling, and it like I got like the chills and then this warm feeling and then goosebumps, and it was just like my whole body, and I was like, "Ooh, like that was good," like that was almost an orgasm, like just,
Yeah,
and
totally.
I was like, that's what this is all about, helping people. Like, this is that feeling. Like, this is why we do it,
Mhm.
and that dopamine rush is exactly what it was. And because I had like this sobriety time under my belt where my dopamine was actually, at a decent level, and then I got that dopamine rush from actually doing something good, and it was healthy, and it was just like selfless. I wasn't getting paid to do it. I was there to help the Salvation Army, and that was that pivotal moment that I was like, whew, like this is the feeling that I want, because it's better than any drug.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. It's such a cool thing. Like, yeah, once you're in the place to like really do that and have the connections kind of happen where you're like in that. Because I mean, honestly, to be there and to be an example of what they want their son to be, I mean, even that alone is so powerful, right? Because you're like, what? Like, I'm not even where I need to be. Like, what are you talking about? Like, so I don't know, it's a really neat cycle that happens. As you kind of go through that.
Thank
It's
you, Calico.
Yeah, Calico, she's awesome. She actually like so Calico does all the programming. So it was crazy when I was like texting you, getting all the information and stuff. Usually Calico does all that really professional via email. So shout out to Calico for actually
Heck
like
yeah,
keeping it
thank you.
together. Yeah, I kind of snuck this one out of her hands, but usually she like collects like the EPK and does all the cool stuff on the back end. So yeah, she does everything. She does like all of her branding and all of the
Heck
graphics
yeah.
and all the cool stuff. So she's
Thank
totally
you, and thank you for being here for the hour and 46 minutes.
yeah.
I was like, "So how long do you want this to go for?" She's like, about 45 minutes." An
Right.
hour and 45 minutes later.
Yeah, well, I
Big love
appreciate
to
it.
you.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I think on that note, we'll probably wrap it up.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for coming and hanging out with us over at Pinecase. I really do appreciate it. I know that
it
you
was
got a
my
lot.
pleasure.
Yeah, it's really, really cool, and like keep doing all the good stuff that you're doing. Um, yeah, we're glad you didn't miss the conversation either, Calico. She's so cool. She actually, so
Thank
right
you.
now we have a bursary and a scholarship program. So we have a bursary for the kids to put kids into music lessons that maybe struggle with some mental health things. They don't have to be, but
Very
sometimes
cool.
sometimes music can be a great tool to have in your tool belt for that. And then we also have a scholarship which is going out this September, which is crazy because we have like I think 700 and something applicants right now. So I got to kind of get through that
Very
process. But
cool.
yeah, for people that are using education to help further the cause for music and mental health. So that's really exciting. And Calico is like spearheading a lot of the fundraising and stuff for that. So
Nice. Very, very cool.
yeah,
Heck yeah.
yeah. But yeah, I'll leave you to it. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, and everybody, you guys stay safe out there. Honestly,
Yeah,
I know it's not always like the most safest environment to be out there on the streets, but if you are out there, stay hydrated, and reach out. We got our hotline going all the time, and please go check out Quinn on all of his platforms because you won't be disappointed. It is super super rad what you guys got going on.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, all my socials are well, my Facebook, I have Quinn Lapeyre is my main page, and then I have a recovery page, I have a backup page, I have a more spiritual you, where I talk about, light, I'm sorry, sound frequency and um, spiritual modalities. I put sound. I do sound healing, so I make like sound bowl videos. I post that there. I talk about plants, just like spiritual stuff. I also am partnered with Men's Tribal House Sober Living, which is a med card friendly sober living, so we don't discriminate against how people choose to recover. That is Men's Tribal House. Also have that Facebook page, and then on Instagram, it's quinnstone.ig and quinnstone.tt on TikTok. And if you're interested in helping fund or donating towards the RV project, that would be super helpful. It's actually been fully funded by our followers, and we are very, very grateful for that. And because of our followers and our donations, we've been able to get this RV going, and running, and we just got to get the registration and insurance and we're set to go. So if you want to help out with any of that, we'd really appreciate it. It helps help the people experiencing homelessness get a shower and a fresh haircut. And trust me, that means a lot to us.
Thank you so much. Everyone, Quinn Lapeyre, you guys stay safe. And until then.
Thank you.